What's up guys, my name is Josh and welcome to another review. Today we're going to be talking about the WU Audio WES 2, which is an electrostatic energizer coming in at about $4,500, which on that price point, that seems very expensive for audio equipment, but honestly in the realm of energizers that are any good, I actually kind of consider that to be mid-range. So we're going to be taking a look at it today. And of course, like always, we're going to start with the build. So unfortunately, this build is made primarily of aluminum, which keeps it as lightweight as possible, although it's still a very heavy unit. The only reason why I don't really care for aluminum that much is because it's a pretty soft metal, and it will unfortunately scratch over time. If you rub anything abrasive against that, it's probably gonna scratch a little bit, which is a little bit of a downside. I recommend both personally and professionally to get the silver version. One, because the aluminum is not gonna show scratches as much, and on a personal note, I just think it looks a little bit better. So on the note of it being overbuilt, it's quite heavy. It features about 12 tubes in total, 3 different inputs, 2 different outputs, 4 knobs for input, volume, standby power, and actual power. And then it has these glass plates, and I took this one off the bottom. There's another one on the top. Not sure if you can see it or not, but these are for basically blocking any heat moving forward. Now, in my kind of testing here, if you're keeping this real close to you, I did find this to help quite a bit. It did seem to keep it kind of radiating onto your face, but I didn't think it really did anything for actually cooling the room down. So if you have this far away from you, I think you could get away with leaving this off and your room is just gonna get just as hot as it would before. Regarding that heat, if you're leaving this on 24/7, I think your room is inevitably gonna heat up a little bit because there's 12 tubes total. And you know, if it's gonna be on, it's gonna be, of course, radiating heat, but it wasn't awful. Like it wasn't anything that I was like, okay, this is gonna be a big problem if I leave this on for too long. I felt like it was, you know, a reasonable amount of heat, but not overkill. Regarding the tubes that are on there, they have 12 total tubes. They have 2 phase splitter tubes, which we'll talk about in a second, 2 rectifier tubes, 4 power tubes, and 4 driver tubes. And then on the back for inputs, they have 2 XLR balanced inputs and 1 unbalanced RCA input, which go into those phase splitter tubes to take an unbalanced signal and turn it into a balanced signal for the energizer to output to your headphones. Now, speaking of those headphones, the headphones that I was using to test this were both the Jade 2 electrostatic headphone and the HE60 headphone, which real quick here, I have a 3-part series going over that whole HE60 build. It was a lot of fun. It was a great project. I'll link all of those videos down below, but that headphone is actually the reason this is here. WU offered to lend me their unit to actually use that in the testing for that review. And I in turn want to do a review of this product to kind of balance those scales a little bit. Okay, so now I want to go over a little bit of the general sound signature and the capability and the style of these tubes. But first, I want to make it kind of a disclaimer about tubes. I think when it comes to whether you're on the low end or high end of tubes, I think the point of tubes is to find a sound signature that you enjoy, because I don't really think that there's a point in arguing over the technical values of something that is inherently a non-technical device. If you want super precise and super technical, I'd recommend going with a solid state. Solid states have measurements to back up that they're going to be kind of a more pure version of sound, while tubes seem to be about finding the right tube for the right user and finding a sound that sounds, above all, I think, natural to the user. So I'm going to describe what I think this tube sounds like versus some other tubes that I've heard. I don't have, unfortunately, any electrostatic tube amplifiers to compare against. I just have other tube amplifiers and what they did versus solid states. So we'll get into that though. So the other electrostat that I have here is the Jade 2 Energizer, which I do not think is any sort of reference point for an electrostatic energizer, but I work with what I got here. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. I think the biggest improvement for sound is going to be the bass response. On both headphones that I tested on, you went from a very technical, very clinical, very analytical, and kind of boring bass response to something that has a lot of inherent warmth and depth. And it didn't seem to be adding massive amounts of distortion to improve this either. It kept the clarity, it kept the detail, but just added the amount. I think it's important to note here with electrostatic headphones, I've never heard one that has any level of bass response that would be comparable to a really good Planar's bass. Or even a really good dynamics bass response. As a platform, I think it's a little bit limited there, but this did do a lot better for introducing a little bit of that bass into those electrostatic headphones without taking it too far and without distorting or sounding weird. And I found that very, very enjoyable. And the reason why I think this is so important for electrostats is I feel like the broader range of bass response that you can give it, the more open it's going to be to other styles of music that are going to sound decent with. Because right now, I think electrostats, at least the ones I've heard, are very good, but you really got to be selective with the type of music that you're listening to. Otherwise, you're going to have far better examples with different headphones. They can still sound fine, but there's just going to be headphones that handle specific genres better. And there still are, but I do think it broadens the range a little bit and definitely opens the door to more modern music. So songs like Sin City from Black Atlas or Alone Again by The Weeknd, more modern stuff, it's going to allow that to play in a far more enjoyable way than it would from the Jade. Okay, now I want to talk about the warmth style that it delivers and kind of describe what type of bass response and what type of mid-range warmth it's actually giving these headphones, because it's not exactly the same as some other tubes I've heard. So what this tube's kind of gift, I think, is the ability to add and fill in the gaps rather than take away gaps. A lot of the tubes I've heard tend to back things up. They tend to spread things out quite far. And because of that, if you're dealing, like, let's say this is your information, well, when you spread it out, the information kind of spreads with it. And then you get all these gaps in between the music and the sounds, and you feel like there's kind of spots missing, but it adds that depth or that far away factor. Well, this pulls things away, but it more just takes this, but fills in the gaps. And it's able to keep all of the information and all the classical informative nature of those electrostatic headphones, adds warmth, but without sacrificing a lot of the detail retrieval and without sacrificing a lot of kind of the in-between things that would normally be happening. So the way I would kind of describe this in simple terms are going to be it adds richness to the sound rather than spaciousness. Some tubes are really good at spaciousness. Some tubes I think are really good at richness. This is more on the richness side. Okay, now one thing I do want to mention here is there is a slight hit to resolution. Total capable resolution, most notably in the top end, not so much in the lower end. It does take, I would say it's like 97%, 98% of what the Jade can do for top end detail and resolution. Now, I think that this is a compromise I would make any day. So is this worth it? Well, I think it depends on what you ask me. So if you're asking me like, hey, what's the most amount of detail that I can get like with specific instruments in the top end, I'm gonna have to go with a solid state energizer. But if you ask me, hey, what's the most enjoyable, but still fairly detailed, like still informative version of an electrostatic headphone energizer, I'm gonna go with something like this, something like the WES. I think it adds something that those headphones were missing before, and it really comes down to that warmth. Okay, let's move on though. So another big change here is going to be the Soundstage. With the Jade, with a headphone that already has a decent bit of Soundstage with it, I actually felt like this did quite a bit to actually expand upon what that headphone was capable in its stock formation. It was quite a bit wider, I would say. Now, it doesn't seem to scale with every headphone though. The HE60 is very, very in your head type of headphone. That's all you're really hearing. It's just right here, just information coming in and blasting against your ears. This does widen it, gives you a little bit of breathing room, but it doesn't go from here to out here. It doesn't seem to drastically change the nature of the headphone in a way that I found to be drastically unnatural. It kind of just seemed to accentuate what the headphone was already doing and just give you not necessarily more precision, but it just gave you a little bit more kind of wiggle room. It kind of gave you a little bit more space to deal with the sound that was coming in. Now that, I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody else but me, but if you were to hear this, I think that it would kind of make sense as to what I'm saying. I'm hoping at least, but that's kind of the way I took it. And so that's what I'm going to report here. So other minor changes I think are going to be more specific for a tube versus tube comparison. And since that's not something I can do, unfortunately, I think I'm going to leave it here. I think I just want to talk about what I definitely know it's changing versus a solid state sound, and what that difference is like. And then maybe down the road that comparison between two different tube energizers is something we can look into if you guys are interested. So I do think that is going to wrap it up. Last thing I want to talk about in the concluding statements here is going to be the value for it. It's a very expensive audio piece, but you also kind of have to look at the market that it's existing in, which is already very high priced. So it's not really out of the realm of possibility for the normal potential buyers of something like this. Personally, I didn't really feel like this is anything that was drastically mind-blowing or was something that I definitely think is going to be the new reference standard for anything. But it did seem like a very competent unit with a very lovely sound. I think just it's going to come down to whether or not it's a sound signature that you like, with the focus on richness rather than wide open sound. At least that was my take on it with the 2 headphones that I was able to test with here. So I want to send a big thank you to Woo for sending this out. I want to send a big thank you to you for watching this video and hopefully liking it and subscribing down below if you want to see more audio content like this. All right, guys, until the next video, my name is Josh, signing off.